First, I want to say that in regards to the framework that was posed yesterday evening, I think we need to remember that.
Can you speak into the mic?
Oh, okay. I was trying not to because I have a very loud voice.
Well, I can't hear you.
Okay. In yesterday's panel, plenary, it was a number of things were raised. And I think that one of the most important things that we need to always keep in mind, that law is not immutable. Because if law was immutable, we would still have slavery, which was a legal entity in this country. And what ended those laws and the Dred Scott ruling and a number of Supreme Court rulings regarding slavery and the rights of black people was the movement and the resistance and the struggle led by the millions. And that we need to keep in mind when we think of the power that we're facing. That each and every one of us as an individual may seem to have a sense of vulnerability and weakness, but when we harness all of our individual efforts into a collective process, we become much more of a powerful force. So I wanted to raise another aspect of the network from personal experience. I've been in the union movement for over 35 years. I worked with SEIU, the hotel workers, and the last 27 years in the Transport Workers Union of New York. And one of the things as a political activist, before that with the Puerto Rican independence movement, refusing to serve in Vietnam, of course I was of the generation of the 60s who entered labor, and entered labor with a broader social agenda, besides the bread and butter traditional issues. And one of the issues that our generation that is now in somewhat the leadership of the Labor Federation, we would try to bring was the question of Palestine. And in 1989, my rank and file reform caucus, we won our delegate slate to the convention, national convention of our union, the Transport Workers Union of the United States. And we drafted a platform point on the question of the union's ownership of Israeli bonds. And I don't know how many of you are aware, in the AFL-CIO, there is to the tune of almost $5 billion invested in Israeli bonds. And this goes back to the McCarthyite period and the post-McCarthyite period in which labor made its compact with the state. And part of it was recognition of Israel and supporting that international agenda. So since 1948 to the present, there's over $5 billion invested in Israeli bonds. And this is not without any consent or even knowledge of most of the rank and file working class members of the AFL-CIO. Very few people know about that their money is invested in a bond that is part of an oppressive social political relationship. Anyway, in 1989, we brought it up to our convention, and I had the honor of doing that. And of course, a ton of bricks, besides the fact that we were fighting the old dinosaur guards and other issues, but this particular international question, this has nothing to do with labor. This is it. Anyway, the point was this. My union, Transport Workers Union, was built by Irish, German, Italian, and was not part of the historical role of the Jewish labor activists of the, as we know, it was not. It was mostly Irish, Germans, and Italians. And even today, most of our membership was predominantly and is Latino and African American. At the convention, all of a sudden, they bring out this guy who claimed to have been a vice president of one of the locals in the national. He claimed to be Jewish, so he, of course, blasted us anti-Semitic. So, I was quite surprised who the hell was he. Anyway, afterwards, I confronted him. I said, well, which local are you representing and where do you come from? He says, well, no, I'm not actually in the Transport Workers Union. I'm here on behalf of the Jewish Labor Committee. The Jewish Labor Committee is another extension of this network. In labor, the Jewish Labor Committee is an arm of the AFL-CIO, headed by Stuart Applebaum, the president of the Retail Wholesale Distributor Service Union, And their job is to monitor and to guarantee that there is no debate and no movement in labor in relationship to the question of Palestine-Israel. And those of us who have had to address this issue have met this wall and physical threat and death threats, intimidation. And this is, I just wanted to bring that up because there was a little bit of remarks about labor and the question of class. And I think it's important to keep this in mind. Fundamentally, as a social, political agenda, there is no way we can go forward without the role of labor. The most important social movement that is ready and hopefully soon to explode. And significantly, there is movement at the lower level. As many of you may know, in Oakland, there was again a successful stopping of an Israeli ship, and it got really big support. Got very good support by the rank and file. And of course, that's the ILWU, which has a historical, significant role in labor. Anyway, also, Richard Trumka, the president of FACIO, elected in 2009, one of his first speaking engagements was before the Jewish Labor Committee. And at the Jewish Labor Committee, he spoke out against the boycott divestment campaign, again using the argument that it was anti-Semitic. Here is a guy who came up from the rank and file and also supported the struggle against the apartheid and supported boycott then. Recently he spoke and gave a very good speech, I was quite surprised, on the question of racism and Ferguson. Very good. Much better than the old dinosaurs that we had to contest with in the early 60s, the George Meany and Company, who of course never attacked anyone who raised the question of race in the labor movement. Significant. But of course, that does not deviate from the continual AFL-CIO support for the foreign policy of the U.S., which is deeply embedded with racism and colonialism and settler colonialism, whether it's Palestine, Latin America, or Africa. So these are just points of references to be able to think about. Now, in terms of where we're at a very significant moment. It is reflective of the fact that Israel finds itself at a very critical juncture in terms of its international presentation and views. And the fact is that the movement is making headways. We need to always remember the famous revolutionary Amilcar Cabral, tell no lies, claim no easy victories. Well, we don't make any claims of great victories, but we are making significant victories and movement from the boycott up into being able to stop physically certain aspects of the Israeli economy. So this is why there is this response. And we are seeing within the present period a deepening reinvigoration of what we faced in this country, and we thought we had already destroyed it by our struggle in the 60s, the whole McCarthyite perspective. Remember, during the 50s, people were forced to sign pledges that they were not communists. They did not teach or espouse the overthrow of this country. Whether it was teachers, union activists had to pledge that they were not communists in order to retain union office at the time. And now we're facing a very similar where we're being told, are you or you have ever signed or supported the boycott?
Yes. In
January, I was part of a delegation to Palestine. And at the checkpoint, the Allenby Bridge, the delegation, mostly professors and academics, including myself, one of the questions they kept asking is, have you ever signed something on the boycott? Have you signed something on the question critical of Israel? And we found that very unusual. It really struck us. And each and of course, all of them said, yes, we have. Anyway, so the political climate is one that we are going to have to expect to get worse. And the recent examples, as illustrated so far, are indicative of that. The attack against Stephen Salata, the attack against the SJP, the attack against Professor Abdul Hadi in San Francisco. This AMCA is an organization of two. It's an organization of two people. But it's who's behind them that gives the weight of their attack against Professor Abdul Hadi, the the AMED program, and the San Francisco State University and its legacy of struggle against, for ethnic studies. So this is the things that we're facing. I'm gonna just close by saying, again, after me? Yes, okay, good. So I just wanted to get back to this question of civility. It's very important. Yeah, and the reason I raise it, again, from my own personal experiences as a labor organizer, if the unions had been civil, we would not have unions. If the unions hadn't taken over the auto plants, we wouldn't have gotten the right to collective bargaining and all of the number of others which are, of course, being eroded. My own union in 2005, we went on strike in New York. You may have heard about it. Very short, but very intense. And, you know, you don't really hear about the internal dynamics and the pressures and the oppression and the exploitation and the brutality that goes on in trade unions and the everyday abuse that workers have. But of course, it comes to the surface in a situation like a strike. And in terms of civility, now the workers who went on a strike, all of a sudden, according to Bloomberg, who was a multi-billionaire mayor of the city, now we were categorized as thugs because our conduct was unbecoming. Obviously, this lends itself to the question, if Rosa Parks hadn't been uncivil, obviously, and on and on, I don't need to illustrate it further, but I think that it's important to be able to challenge this. It has very significant dynamics, the way it's being framed in academia, but obviously it cuts across. Because again, it's who determines and who decides and who declares what's civil and uncivil. Yeah. John Brown was uncivil. The abolitionists were uncivil. Even Martin Luther King was. Yeah. I tell you, when I was a young radical, I dismissed Martin Luther King. But when you study deeply the evolution of Martin Luther King, you realize why they wanted to kill him, and they did kill him the year before he died, before he was killed. And the way they treated him in the press and the media, and there's a new book that has just come out by... Yes, exactly, that speaks to this. Again, we need to be able not to surrender the narrative and the framework, and it's all connected. It's all connected with this, it's all connected with the global imperial project that we're facing, and also the neoliberal assault on all of the social fabrics and gains and programs that we fought for over the last decade, including labor, women, lesbian and gay, the oppressed throughout. So please, that's all I really want to add.